She didn't flinch when he said it, just stared straight ahead, eyes like stone, fists unclenched but ready. The courtroom was dead silent, the kind of silence that hums in your bones. You could hear the AC wheezing, the scrape of a pen cap somewhere in the back. And still, no one said a damn thing. "A Sharpie?" the judge repeated, voice calm, almost bored. "You think that's what this is about?" The girl, Jasmine Bell, 16 years old and already carrying more weight than most adults, just looked up. Not scared, not angry, just tired. Tired of hearing that word, thug. That label they slap on every black kid who doesn't smile or speak soft. Her knees didn't shake. Her voice didn't quiver. She said nothing. But her silence? Oh, it was louder than any outburst could ever be. The courtroom had been buzzing before this. A routine case, supposedly. Vandalism. Some statue nobody but old racists missed. The kind of monument you drive past and pretend not to see. Jasmine had tagged it with one word in red. Liar. That was it. One word. And that single, shaky stroke of rebellion had landed her here. The judge, who clearly thought himself some twisted mix of philosopher and plantation master, leaned back in his leather chair like he owned every breath in the room. "This is what happens," he said, with that smirk that could curdle blood, "when kids don't learn respect. Just another angry little thug with a Sharpie." The bailiff shifted awkwardly. The stenographer froze mid-keystroke, and even the damn fly buzzing near the fluorescence paused. Jasmine still didn't speak. Not because she couldn't, because she'd heard it all before. From teachers, cops, neighbors who clutched their purses when she passed. And now, from a man in robes who thought he had the final word. But this wasn't just any courtroom. There was a whisper, barely audible, sliding through the room like a chill draft. "She's here." 3 words. That's all it took. The air shifted. Chairs creaked as people leaned in. Then, the heavy door at the back creaked open, slow as a horror movie entrance. And in walked someone who didn't need to wear her power. Judge Naomi Ayers. Yeah, that Judge Ayers. The one whose stare could make grown men forget their first names. The one who took down an entire zoning board in 22 for racial bias. Who once quoted James Baldwin and dropped the hammer on a crooked sheriff in the same breath. And right now, she was walking into the circus like it was already hers. The presiding judge looked up, confused. "Can I help you?" he asked, clearly annoyed. Judge Ayers didn't even glance at him. She just strode up, calm as a moonrise, heels clicking, confidence stitched into every step. "You've said enough," she said flatly. He blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said." She turned to the crowd, locking eyes with each person like a conductor before the drop. "Yo, mas. You've said enough. This isn't a court, this is a setup." A murmur rolled through the benches. The teenage girl looked at Ayers with something almost like disbelief. Maybe even hope. Ayers stepped forward and pulled a folder from her coat and slapped it on the desk. Motion to recuse, on grounds of judicial misconduct and racial bias. The old judge scoffed, clearly ready to puff up and start posturing. But she cut him off with one raised hand. "Your Honor, there are over 12 recorded cases in your record with disproportionate sentencing for black youth. 6 overturned on appeal. 3 complaints from court staff. This one's not going to vanish into sealed files." "You're out of line," he spat. "No," she said, calm as ice. "You were when you called her a thug." And for the first time, Jasmine smiled, just a little. A flash of teeth, like the first sun ray breaking through a thundercloud. The judge tried to push back, but it was over. Bailiffs whispered. Reporters checked their recorders. The audience sat on the edge of a collective breath. And the room felt like it was holding on to something about to shatter. Judge Ayers turned to Jasmine. "You'll get a fair hearing," she said, voice low but firm. "Not today, not in this room, but soon, I promise." And Jasmine nodded. Not because she trusted easily, but because for the first time in her life, someone powerful stood between her and the fire. As Ayers turned to leave, the old judge tried one last thing. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Ayers paused at the door, looked back and said, "No, you will." Then the door closed, sealing the moment like a tomb, and the whisper turned into a roar. Judge Ronald Greaves lived for the spotlight. The man didn't just bang a gavel. He performed it, like it was a mic drop at the Apollo. He loved the camera flashes, the stiff silence that followed one of his so-called tough love speeches, and most of all, the power. The courtroom wasn't about justice for Greaves. It was about being the lead in a one-man show called Look at Me, I Own This Place. And today? Oh, he was in rare form. The courtroom was stacked, wall to wall with sweaty bodies, murmuring lawyers, curious journalists, and bored interns pretending not to be on TikTok. Every seat was filled, and the cameras were rolling for the latest circus act, State versus Kendra Miles. A black woman, mid-30s, arrested for disturbing the peace after confronting officers outside a protest where they, let's be real, were doing the disturbing. Greaves smirked as he scanned the courtroom, leaning into his chair like he was on a throne. "Let me be clear," he began, adjusting his robe like a cape. "This is not a platform for political theater. This is my courtroom. And Ms. Miles," he paused, eyes narrowing like a predator before the pounce. "You may think your little tantrum on Main Street makes you a hero, but to me, you're just another loudmouth who doesn't know her place." The words hit like a gut punch, audible gasps. One person whispered, "He didn't just say that." But he did, and he was proud of it. Kendra didn't flinch. Her lips stayed pressed in a thin line, hands folded tightly in her lap. She was dressed in navy slacks and a black blouse, hair pulled back, eyes steady. She had expected this. What she hadn't expected was who walked in next. The back door swung open with zero subtlety. Heads turned, murmurs sparked, and in walked a woman in a crisp cream blazer, her heels snapping like gunfire on marble. She moved like someone who didn't just command rooms. She rewrote the laws inside them. Her name was Dr. Amara Wells, civil rights attorney, Harvard JD, and walking, talking courtroom storm. Greaves saw her and hesitated for just a second, just long enough to register the danger. "May I approach, Your Honor?" she asked, already halfway to the bench. Greaves straightened. "Who are you?" She dropped a folder on the clerk's desk without breaking eye contact. "Special counsel for the defense. Filed 10 minutes ago, emergency substitution." The clerk nodded, verifying the paperwork. Greaves was not pleased. "This is highly irregular." "So is calling a black woman a loudmouth in open court," Amara said, calm as a sleeping volcano. "But here we are." The room snapped. Someone in the back coughed just to hide a laugh. Greaves flushed, his ears turning the color of raw meat. "You're out of line," he growled. Amara smiled. Not sweet, not friendly. The kind of smile that made men like Greaves wish they hadn't underestimated her. "I'll make it simple," she said. "Your Honor, the defense moves for immediate recusal on grounds of judicial bias, and we have a certified statement from 3 witnesses to your comments prior to this hearing, on record, mocking my client and referring to protesters as urban riffraff." The air in the room got heavy, the kind of heavy that means something real is about to hit. "You think a little drama is going to scare me off this bench?" Greaves sneered. Amara leaned in. "No, but a federal inquiry will." Silence. He opened his mouth, but she cut him off with one sentence that would echo across headlines by nightfall. "You smirked, sir, but today we smile back. That was it, game, set, match. The reporters already tweeting." Kendra, staring at her new lawyer like she just watched a queen storm a castle and toss the king in the moat. And Judge Ronald Greaves, well, his next ruling wouldn't be in court. It'd be deciding whether to resign quietly or be dragged out publicly. The courtroom didn't erupt, it shifted. Power had changed hands, and for once, the audience wasn't clapping for the judge. They were clapping for the woman who shut him down. And this time the whole damn country heard it. She walked into the courtroom like she'd been there before. Chin high, back straight, not a single tremor in her step. Zara Whitfield was 17, and if you didn't know her name yet, you were about to learn it. Burned into your memory like a headline you couldn't stop rereading. Her arrest. A setup. Plain and simple, the kind of coordinated stunt that smelled like it had been cooked up in a back room with cigars and bad intentions. The charge? Inciting violence during an unauthorized gathering. Translation. She spoke too clearly, too boldly, and too black in front of a crowd that refused to sit down. The irony? She had been quoting the Constitution when they cuffed her. Cameras were already rolling by the time she took her seat at the defense table. Wrists still red from the zip ties they'd used like she was some kind of threat. She wasn't. But her name, her voice, that was dangerous. Because Zara wasn't just some kid with a bullhorn. She was the adopted daughter of Evelyn Whitfield. Yes, that Evelyn Whitfield. The U.S. Attorney General. The woman who took down corrupt senators like they were playing cards and stacked the deck with actual justice for once. But today wasn't about Evelyn. Today was about Zara. And whether or not this country still had room for a young black girl who dared to speak her truth without apology. Judge Kessler presided. Old, slow, and exactly the kind of white man who thought he could mansplain the law to a girl who probably corrected her AP government teacher for fun. He wore his robe like armor, as if it would protect him from the blowback of what was about to happen.
"Miss Whitfield,"
he began, already annoyed. "Do you understand the charges being brought against you?" Zara didn't flinch. "Yes, Your Honor. Though I'd like to point out they were filed without evidence, based on misquoted statements from a crowdsourced video that's already been disproven by 2 independent sources." Boom. A murmur ran through the room. Even the court clerk tilted his head like, "Wait, she's 17? Kessler grunted. "This isn't a debate competition." "Clearly," Zara said, just loud enough for the mic. "Or I wouldn't be the only one here telling the truth." Gasps, stifled laughs. The judge flushed, clearly not used to being outmaneuvered by a teenager. That's when the door opened. Every head turned, and in walked Evelyn Whitfield. Not as a mom, not as the AG.
but as a damn wrecking ball.
She didn't take a seat. She walked straight to the prosecutor's table, leaned down, and whispered something so quiet no one could catch it, except the young man sitting there, who promptly turned the color of wet chalk. Seconds later, he stood and stammered, "The state withdraws all charges." Kessler blinked. "Excuse me?" "The case is dropped. Immediate dismissal." The gallery exploded. Cameras flashed. Reporters scrambled. And in the center of it all, Zara didn't cheer, didn't cry. She just stood up, collected her things, and walked out like the whole thing had bored her. But just before she crossed the threshold, she turned, met the judge's eyes, and said, "For the record, Your Honor, my name is Zara Whitfield, 17, honor student, debate champ. And just so we're clear, you'll be seeing me again. Only next time I'll be the one in your seat." Then she was gone. Mic drop, no. That was a gavel drop, future tense. And the country? Yeah, they heard that one too. Evelyn Whitfield was in the middle of a national security briefing. Some closed-door, half-classified tangle of acronyms and egos. When her phone vibrated once, just once. She ignored it at first. These rooms didn't like distractions. But something about the silence that followed felt too still. Like the air knew before she did. She glanced down, unlocked the screen, and there it was. "He called me a thug in court." That was it. No punctuation, no emojis, no sarcasm or rage, just a sentence. Flat, sharp, and too calm. From her daughter. "Zara." Evelyn didn't gasp. Her hands didn't shake. If anything, everything inside her slowed. Her heart ticked down like a metronome turning to stone. Because she knew this tone. Knew this version of her daughter. The one who didn't cry, didn't panic. The one who, when pushed past the edge, fell silent and waited. Zara had inherited that from her. Evelyn excused herself without a word. Half the room didn't even notice. The rest didn't dare ask. They knew better. By the time she hit the hallway, her assistant was already pacing, phone in hand. "Ma'am, something happened in juvenile court." "I know," she said, voice like frost. "Prep the jet. I want to be in Charleston before nightfall. Pull every docket from Judge Kessler's courtroom for the past 6 months. I want his rulings, his comments, and any disciplinary flags, formal or informal. Start with juvenile cases involving black defendants." The assistant blinked. "You think this is—" "I know it is." Evelyn didn't run. She moved fast, but not rushed. Every step was precise, loaded with purpose. By the time she reached her office, 3 aides had already gathered, laptops open, screens glowing with early intel. Zara was in court for a hearing tied to the protest incident, one of them said, voice tight. The judge made a verbal statement that triggered several observers to post on social media. It's trending under hashtag Whitfield daughter. Evelyn's jaw didn't tighten. Her voice didn't rise, but the energy in the room dropped 10 degrees when she said, "Play the clip." It was grainy, shaky iPhone footage from the back of the courtroom, but the audio was clear. Judge Kessler's voice crackled through the speaker. "These kids don't respect anything anymore. You walk into court like you own it, dressed like you're going to a rap battle, running your mouth like a thug." She didn't need to hear more. "Turn it off." Silence. "I want a press team standing by, and I want our legal response drafted in 30. I'm not just protecting my daughter. I'm setting a precedent. Kessler doesn't get to bury this in procedure." One aide cleared their throat, nervous. "Ma'am, if you speak out directly, it could be seen as interference. From the Attorney General to a state-level judge, there'll be accusations of overreach." Evelyn turned slowly, eyes like sharpened obsidian. "You think I care how this looks? He called my daughter, a 17-year-old girl with no record, no threat, no crime, a thug. In open court, on the record. That's not a gaffe. That's a goddamn verdict before the case has even begun. He said what he meant, and now he gets to mean it in front of the entire country." The room went still. Then phones started ringing. Fingers hit keyboards. The war room had been activated. Evelyn stood by the window, staring out at the DC skyline. Her reflection was faint against the glass, just enough to see the steel in her own gaze. Zara had known exactly what she was doing, sending that text. She wasn't asking for help, she was sounding the alarm. And Evelyn? She wasn't showing up as just a mother. She was showing up as the storm. Governor Raymond Holt didn't usually take unscheduled calls, especially not from blocked numbers routed through Capitol Hill. But when his chief of staff barged in without knocking, eyes wide, lips pale, and handed him the secure line with just 3 words, "You need to answer," he picked up. Governor Holt speaking. No intro, no pleasantries, just a voice, smooth, professional, and laced with something heavier than threat, certainty. "This isn't a warning, Governor," the voice said. "It's a courtesy." A pause. "Judge Ronald Greaves." Another pause. Then just one word. "Watch." Click. The line went dead. No name, no department, no callback number. Just static, and a hollow ringing in Holt's ear. He stared at the receiver like it had bit him. Across the room, his staff stood frozen. No one moved. No one dared. Then the governor stood up, walked to the windows overlooking the Capitol building, and let out a long, slow breath. He knew the name. Of course he did. Ronald Greaves had been a fixture in Georgia's court system for years. Tough on crime. No nonsense. Traditional values. All the polite code words for exactly the kind of rot the Justice Department had been sniffing out since the Whitfield investigation blew open. And now they were calling. Not asking, not warning, just telling him it started. Because when the Attorney General's daughter gets humiliated in a courtroom by a judge with a history of thinly veiled hate, the country doesn't stay quiet. And when DC whispers, Georgia listens. Governor Holt turned to his aide. "Get me everything on Greaves, every ruling, every sanction, every complaint buried in HR folders and flagged emails." "Sir, that could—" "I don't care what it costs," Holt snapped. "He's got eyes on him now. National ones. If he so much as breathes wrong, I want it documented." The aide nodded and bolted. Back at the window, the governor rubbed his temple. Because this wasn't just politics anymore. This wasn't about optics or polls. This was about the storm coming down from the Capitol. Quiet, fast, and aimed dead center at Georgia's judiciary. And Ronald Greaves, he wasn't just being watched. He was about to become a headline. By 9 o'clock a.m., the halls of Fulton County Courthouse felt off. The usual morning buzz, the shuffle of lawyers, the clack of heels, the low murmur of legal gossip, was still there, but quieter, tense. Like the building was holding its breath. It started with the metal detectors, then the extra bodies, plainclothes, all of them, no badges, just government-issue shoes, sharp eyes and earpieces tucked like secrets. Federal observers, unannounced, unscheduled, unignorable. They slipped in like fog, one by one, blending into the gallery like regular citizens. But this wasn't a casual drop-in. They were watching something, and everyone inside knew it. Except Judge Ronald Greaves. He strutted into courtroom 5B like he always did. Chin up, black robe fluttering, smile cocked just enough to let everyone know whose stage this was. He scanned the room, clocked the unfamiliar faces in the back. The camera equipment hastily being set up by reporters who'd been tipped off, but he didn't flinch. Greaves was built for this kind of spotlight. Hell, he lived for it. "This is going to be a quick docket, folks," he said with that same drawl that always sounded one word away from a Fox News soundbite. "We're not here to entertain." But oh, how wrong he was. Half the courtroom was already pulling out their phones. Not recording, yet, but close. Ready. Because the rumors had started before sunrise. Federal oversight. Internal review. The name Whitfield whispered like a match striking sulfur. And now, here he was, talking down to a Latina mother, fighting a housing eviction like it was just another Tuesday. Acting like nothing around him had changed. Like the air didn't feel tighter. Like the walls weren't already listening. Greaves didn't know the floor was shifting beneath him. But it was. And every time he opened his mouth, it cracked a little more. One of the federal observers in the back, a tall black man with a DOJ pin barely visible under his lapel, jotted a note. The woman beside him whispered, "That makes 4 bias-flagged remarks before 10 a.m. Another snapped a photo of the docket list. Up front, the clerk coughed, eyes darting toward Greaves, trying, hoping. He'd realized this wasn't just another flex session. But he didn't. He launched into a monologue about personal responsibility, so stale you could have scraped it off the underside of a 90s talk show. Then came the line. "You people come in here wanting handouts." Silence. No one moved. Not the attorneys, not the court officers, not the bailiffs. A click, then another. Cameras. The observers made no reaction, just writing. But the reporters? Oh, they were ready now. Phones in hand. Tweets already half written. Greaves faltered. Just for a second. A flicker of something behind his eyes. Confusion, maybe. Or the realization that, this time, no one was clapping. He looked around. Saw the suits, the cameras, the faces that weren't smiling anymore. And for the first time, he paused before speaking again. But it was too late. The chessboard had moved, and he hadn't even known he was playing. It started as a side task, something tossed onto her desk like busy work. "See if there's anything unusual in Judge Greaves's old sentencing records," they told her. Like it wasn't going to be a rabbit hole straight to hell. Clara. Nguyen was 24, second-year law clerk, brilliant, quiet, and underestimated by everyone in that building. She'd only gotten into legal work because her high school counselor once told her, "You don't seem like a courtroom type." She'd taken that personally. Now, here she was, elbows deep in public records and about to rip the lid off, something monstrous. Greaves's files weren't digital. Of course they weren't. That would have made it too easy. No. His records were a mix of old PDFs, scanned transcripts, and yellowing paper dockets stuffed in filing cabinets that smelled like mildew and arrogance. But Clara didn't mind the mess. She thrived in it. She started slow, built a spreadsheet, added columns for race, age, charge, sentence length, prior record, just data, clean, emotionless. At first, it was the patterns, subtle, then not so subtle. The sentencing disparity between white and black defendants wasn't a gap. It was a goddamn chasm. Then she ran the numbers. 92%. 92% of his harshest rulings, longer than recommended sentences, max penalties, consecutive terms, were handed down to black defendants. Clara blinked at the screen, refreshed it, recalculated. Same number. Most of them were teens, some as young as 15. A few had been charged as adults, which technically wasn't illegal in Georgia. But the language in the transcripts? That's where it got real. "You people think you're above the law. Someone needs to teach you a lesson. Maybe this will scare you straight." Sounded less like sentencing and more like scolding a dog. Clara scrolled through case after case. Kids who'd stolen phones, weed possession, petty theft. 5 years, 7 years. One boy had been given 10 years for breaking into an abandoned house. 10. His name was Marcus Ellison. She remembered it because there was a sticky note on the file that read, "Closed, exonerated, 2021. Wait, exonerated? She searched the name, found an article. Marcus, had been released after 3 years, wrongfully convicted. Evidence had been tampered with. Witness testimony fell apart. He was now suing the state.
Another file.
Then another. 3 exonerations. 2 cases overturned on appeal. 4 where civil suits were pending. A storm already brewing, tucked inside manila folders and bureaucratic dust. Clara's hands hovered over her keyboard. This wasn't just a pattern. This was systemic targeting. Greaves wasn't just biased, he was calculated. And the numbers? The numbers were the smoking gun. She picked up her phone, thumb hovering over her contact list. Not her supervisor. Not the judge she worked under. No, she dialed a different number. One she'd memorized from a DOJ contact sheet passed around during onboarding. In case of misconduct or federal concern. The line rang once. Office of Special Investigations. Clara took a breath. I think I found something. It hit the internet at 7:03 a.m. A 38-second courtroom clip, shaky, grainy, but crystal clear in all the wrong ways. No fancy edits, no music, no filters, just raw footage of Judge Ronald Greaves leaning back in his chair, robe slung over his gut like a shield, voice soaked in condescension as he stared down at Zara Whitfield. She's not a victim, he said, that smirk already working overtime. She's just another loud, ungrateful teen with a chip on her shoulder. Probably didn't even have a father around to teach her respect. Pause.
And then he laughed.
Not a big laugh, not a cackle, just a smug, bitter chuckle. The kind that said, I know I can say this, and no one will stop me.
Except this time?
Oh, this time was different, because the internet heard it, and the internet does not forget. The clip exploded before breakfast. By 8:12 a.m., it had hit 2 million views. By noon, it was trending across every platform. Hashtag her name is Zara Greaves must go. Say his name too. Because you see, what Greaves didn't know, what he should have known, if he'd even pretended to do his job, was that Zara Whitfield's father wasn't absent. He was dead. Sergeant Marcus Whitfield, United States Marine Corps, decorated twice, one of the youngest black squad leaders in his unit. Killed in combat when Zara was 9. He died saving 6 of his men from a roadside ambush outside Fallujah, posthumously awarded the Silver Star, buried with full honors at Arlington. And now his daughter was being mocked by a judge on a public bench like her family name meant nothing. It didn't take long for the journalists to catch up. Photos surfaced. Zara at the memorial wall in D.C., her hand pressed against her dad's name. Her mom, Evelyn Whitfield, placing a folded flag on Zara's lap at the funeral. Clips from Zara's speeches at high school memorial events, where she talked about what it meant to grow up with loss and still lead. And Greaves, he was nowhere to be seen. Reporters showed up outside the courthouse, asking staffers, does he stand by those comments? DOJ spokespeople gave tight-lipped answers. Cable news spun into full sprint. One black anchor on morning TV got so choked up reading Zara's backstory, he had to cut to commercial. By nightfall, the pressure was suffocating. Petitions to remove Greaves hit 500,000 signatures in under a day. Celebrities reposted the clip with captions like, he called her father absent. Her father's in Arlington. Do the math. Veteran organizations started issuing formal statements. Marine mothers, especially, weren't staying quiet. Outside the courthouse, candles were lit. Photos of Zara and her dad were taped to the stone steps. The words, absent never, were chalked across the pavement in bold red letters. And still, Greaves hadn't said a word. But deep inside the courthouse, behind closed doors and tightly shut blinds, his team was scrambling, drafting statements, arguing about context, worrying about optics. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a PR nightmare. This was a political landmine. And Zara? She wasn't on defense anymore. No sirens, no entourage, no grand entrance. Just a matte black SUV with tinted windows, easing to a slow stop in front of Monroe County Courthouse. The kind of arrival that doesn't need to announce itself, because silence hits harder when it carries weight. Out stepped Evelyn Whitfield. No press, no podium, no mic clipped to her collar. Just her, power wrapped in a charcoal trench coat, heels sharp enough to draw blood, and eyes that didn't blink once as she crossed the cracked pavement. She moved, like the courthouse was already hers. Like every inch of ground between the curb and the double doors belonged to her by right. Staff inside caught sight of her through the glass and straightened up. Phones dropped. Conversation stopped. One junior bailiff actually took a step back and whispered, "Is that?" Yes, it was. The United States Attorney General. In person, in Georgia. At that courthouse. The one where her daughter had been humiliated. The one where Judge Ronald Greaves still sat, pretending nothing had shifted, still riding on the fumes of his decaying legacy. But Evelyn wasn't here to throw a tantrum. She was here to deliver the calm before the fire. The metal detector beeped as she walked through, not because she had anything on her, but because it knew, instinctively, this woman wasn't playing. The deputy flinched, waved her through. "Ma'am, Attorney General Whitfield, we weren't told." "That's the point," Evelyn said, her voice calm and low, the kind of tone you lean into whether you want to or not. "I didn't come here for a photo op. I came to observe." She signed her name in the visitor log. Her pen glided across the page, like it had somewhere more important to be. And then she walked, slow, deliberate. Her heels echoed down the hallway, clicking like a countdown. People moved out of her way without thinking. Secretaries, peeking from cracked office doors. Clerks, pretending to sort files while their phones filmed quietly at their sides. Someone in the break room gasped when they caught her reflection in the glass and whispered, "We are so screwed." Evelyn didn't look left, didn't look right. She walked straight to courtroom 4C, the very room Judge Greaves had insulted her daughter in, and took a seat in the back row like any other observer. No flashing badge, no "do you know who I am" energy, just presence, the kind you feel. When Greaves entered from his chambers 5 minutes later, he didn't notice her at first. He shuffled in with his usual smugness, gave his little nod to the clerk, adjusted his robe like he was about to take center stage at some sad one-man play. Then he saw her and froze, not all at once. Just a twitch in his eye, a slight tightening of the jaw. But he knew. Oh, he knew. She met his gaze not with anger, not with pity, with clarity. As if to say, "I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to finish you." He cleared his throat, tried to find his footing. Good morning, let's begin." But the courtroom had already begun shifting. The power? It had moved. Silently, irrevocably. And Judge Greaves was the last one to realize the room didn't belong to him anymore. 8:03 a.m., filed electronically, quietly, legally, brutally. A single motion slid into the Monroe County case log like a blade slipping between ribs. Motion to recuse. Judge Ronald Greaves, filed by the Department of Justice, on behalf of the United States Attorney General's Office. Basis: demonstrated judicial bias, repeated violations of procedural ethics, direct infringement of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VI and Title VII. Addendum: attached evidence includes video footage, documented sentencing patterns, sworn witness statements, and internal clerk testimony. By 8:04, it hit the desk of the chief judge of the district. By 8:05, it was leaked. By 8:07, the world knew. CNN. Breaking DOJ. Seeks recusal of Georgia judge, accused of racial misconduct. MSNBC. Federal motion targets judge who mocked AG's daughter in court. Fox News. Developing story. Political overreach or judicial reckoning. By 8:10, Monroe County Courthouse was buzzing. Not metaphorically, physically. Phones lit up like sirens. Clerks whispered in corners. Bailiffs hovered in doorways like shadows. And in courtroom 4C, Judge Greaves sat behind the bench flipping through his docket, unaware that the walls were already closing in. Until the door opened. A junior clerk, the kind who usually looked invisible, walked straight into the room with eyes wide and hands shaking. She didn't say a word, just handed him a folder with a red stripe and a post-it that simply read, "Urgent. Filed. 8:03 a.m. Greaves frowned, opened it, and froze. It wasn't just a motion. It was a declaration of war. Not from activists, not from protesters, but from the federal government, and worse, from Evelyn Whitfield. He looked up, looked around the courtroom like he could escape the story now engulfing him. That's when he saw them. A row of cameras, tripods just outside the gallery, crews being rushed in with legal clearance. Press passes, boom mics. The press had known before he had. The gallery erupted. Gasps, hushed curses. One older woman in the back clutched her chest and whispered, "Jesus, they actually did it!" A defense attorney dropped his pen. A prosecutor sat back in his chair like he'd just been hit in the chest. One teenage girl, Zara, stood in the back row, arms crossed, calm as a sunrise after a wildfire. Not smirking, not smug, just present. The room wasn't his anymore. Hell, it hadn't been since yesterday. Judge Greaves cleared his throat, voice dry, trying to reclaim something, anything. We will recess until further clarification from who, Ronald? Because the bench isn't yours anymore. The gavel doesn't obey you. The silence no longer protects you. As the cameras started to roll, the only sound louder than the press typing headlines was the voice of Evelyn Whitfield's legal counsel rising from the gallery. Your Honor, on record, until the matter of your recusal is formally addressed, any further ruling risks being rendered invalid under federal review. We respectfully request that you step down now. The judge said nothing. He just sat there, still gripping the gavel like it might save him. But outside, the headlines were already printing his epitaph. There were no filters, no fancy lighting, no glammed-up press conference backdrop. Just Zara Whitfield, 17, standing in front of a sea of reporters and blinking cameras outside Monroe County Courthouse. The wind pulled at the edge of her blazer. Her hair was tied back tight, her voice low, but locked in, controlled. She stepped up to the mic like she was born for it. Behind her stood Evelyn, silent but solid as stone. DOJ reps, civil rights lawyers, veterans, even a few classmates who had driven down just to be there. But Zara, she didn't lean on anyone. She didn't need a damn thing. She looked out across the crowd and said, "There's been a lot of talk about what I did, about why I was arrested, about whether I was being reckless or unruly or disrespectful. So let me clear that up. I didn't vandalize a statue. I wrote a name." A pause. "I wrote Sergeant Malik Whitfield, 1979-2019. Dead silence. No coughs, no camera clicks, even the live stream's chat, thousands deep, froze. "That statue," she continued, voice steady, hard. "It honors soldiers from this state, soldiers who served in wars they didn't start, for freedoms they weren't always given, soldiers who died. But somehow my father's name wasn't on it, so I added it. A breath, with red paint because he bled for this country. A murmur rippled through the press line. Not noise, just the sound of people remembering how to breathe. And for that I was cuffed, labeled a criminal, called a thug by a man in a robe who didn't know me, who didn't ask to know me. She didn't yell, she didn't cry, but her voice carried like thunder rolling through a canyon. My father was a Marine, decorated, dead at 40. I was 9 when we folded the flag over his casket. I still keep it in my room. That man, the one who called him absent? He didn't just insult me. He insulted service. He insulted sacrifice. And he did it from the bench of a court that's supposed to protect the truth. Someone in the crowd whispered, "God damn!" Another reporter wiped their eyes, pretending it was just the wind. Zara looked straight into the nearest camera. "I'm not sorry I wrote his name. I'll never be sorry for that. If this system thinks my father's memory is graffiti, then maybe the system's the thing that needs cleaning." She stepped back. Not broken, not small, unshaken. The crowd didn't erupt. Not at first. It sat in the weight of what she'd just said. Then, like thunder catching up to lightning, applause broke. Slow, rolling, then roaring. A wave of clapping, cheers, fists raised. Her mother didn't speak, just put a hand on Zara's shoulder. The only sign she was proud enough to burst. On Twitter, the clip hit 1 million views in 15 minutes. Veteran groups issued public support statements within the hour. A former senator tweeted, "That courtroom doesn't deserve her. America does." By nightfall, murals of Sergeant Malik Whitfield started going up in downtown Atlanta. And Judge Ronald Greaves? He hadn't been seen since the motion landed, but his silence, it had been replaced by Zara's voice. The spin started slow, One statement to a local reporter. A brief, off-the-record comment outside his chambers. Then a conveniently leaked memo to court staff, trying to reframe the chaos as just another case of a misunderstood courtroom moment. Ms. Whitfield was disruptive, Greaves insisted. Argumentative. She showed no respect for the decorum of the court. I maintained order. That's my duty as a judge. That same quote hit 3 local news blogs within the hour. Then Fox picked it up. Then the right-wing pundits, foaming at the mouth to defend a man they hadn't heard of until yesterday, but were now calling a pillar of traditional justice. Another entitled activist teenager, they claimed. Another conservative judge being attacked for doing his job. But the thing about spin, it doesn't work when the receipts are public, because the audio doesn't lie. And the record, the record was bleeding. By now, legal experts had their hands deep in Greaves's docket. Court watchers, law students, even bored Redditors with too much time had been combing through his rulings for patterns. And they found them, quickly. 92% of his harshest sentences were handed down to black defendants. Over 70% of those had no prior record. 13 cases had been overturned on appeal, 9 of them with language citing judicial overreach and inappropriate commentary. One file showed a 16-year-old girl sentenced to 6 months detention for talking back during a truancy hearing. That would have been bad enough. But then the tapes dropped. Clips from court recordings, public record, now going viral, surfaced online. And they weren't subtle. Kids like you need a real lesson in consequences. I've seen your type before. Mouthy, angry. Father probably ran off too. You'll end up in prison anyway. Might as well learn how a courtroom works now. Each one worse than the last. Each one said with the same sneer. The same grease-covered condescension that made people recoil. Even his own staff started to talk, quietly at first, then openly. A former clerk tweeted, "Greaves once told me don't waste sympathy on these kids. Sympathy's how they get soft." I knew it was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong until Zara. By the end of the week, Judge Ronald Greaves was on every screen in America, but not as a judge, as a problem. He tried to give a press conference, tried to look strong, righteous. He wore his robe, like it could still protect him. He leaned into the podium and said, "I have always upheld the law with fairness and integrity." The crowd didn't boo, they just stared. Then someone shouted from the back, "What law says mocking a dead Marine is justice?" He flinched, just a flicker. But it was there, the crack. Reporters swarmed him with questions. What about the audio? Do you deny the racial disparities in your rulings? Have you ever apologized to the Whitfield family? He didn't answer, he walked away. And that image, Judge Greaves walking off stage, head down, robe flapping behind him like a torn flag, circulated faster than any press statement ever could. He wasn't the story anymore. He was the symptom. And Zara, she was the cure they never saw coming. Monroe County Courthouse hadn't seen this many cameras since, well, ever. A forest of tripods cluttered the steps. Reporters elbowed for position. Satellite vans lined the block like war trucks. You could feel it in the air, like static before a lightning strike. Something big was coming. Something no PR team could scrub clean. At the top of the steps, Evelyn Whitfield stepped to the podium. No flag backdrop, no polished optics. Just her, a binder in one hand and the kind of calm that comes from knowing you hold the truth, and it's about to detonate. "Good afternoon," she said, voice clear, measured, and as precise as a scalpel. "My name is Evelyn Whitfield. I'm the United States Attorney General, and I am here today not as a mother, but as the chief legal officer of this nation. Because what has been allowed to fester in this courthouse does not reflect justice. It reflects rot." The first page flipped. Over the last 72 hours, my department has reviewed sealed files, closed complaints, and internal memos tied to Judge Ronald Greaves. What we've uncovered is not a single incident. It is not a bad day, or a poor choice of words. She held up the folder. It is a pattern of judicial misconduct spanning 2 decades. Reporters froze mid-keystroke. 26 sealed complaints filed between 2003 and 2022. 4 ethics investigations that mysteriously ended without conclusions. 11 official reprimands never entered into his public record. And at least 18 cases where his personal comments violated both federal civil rights standards and the Georgia Code of Judicial Conduct. The flash of cameras, erupted like fireworks. Reporters shouted over each other. But Evelyn didn't blink. She flipped another page. One transcript includes Greaves telling a black teenager that his future was either jail or a job with a mop. Another features him describing a Latina mother as the type that breeds future problems. Gasps audible from the crowd and the press. In one 2011 complaint, later buried, he was cited for suggesting a white defendant deserved leniency because they came from a respectable background. The black co-defendant in the same case received a max sentence. She held the page up for the cameras. This is not bias, this is bigotry in a robe. Behind her, DOJ officials stood shoulder to shoulder. A wall of authority co-signing every word. Federal observers, legal analysts, even state representatives watched from the sidelines. Faces locked tight. These are not rumors. These are documents. And now they are public. My office has just released over 600 pages of findings, evidence, and audio transcripts, all available online. Anyone in this country can read them. No more sealed doors. No more buried truths. One reporter called out, "Madam Attorney General, what happens now?" Evelyn looked straight into the lens of the nearest camera. Effective immediately, Judge Ronald Greaves is under federal judicial review. We are pursuing charges for civil rights violations, abuse of judicial discretion, and obstruction of justice. We will also be reviewing every sentencing decision tied to him in the last 15 years for potential reversal and damages. Another reporter shouted, "And Zara." Evelyn paused, just long enough for the world to catch its breath. My daughter wrote her father's name on a monument that forgot him. Today, I write the names of every child, every parent, every person this man tried to erase, and unlike him, I don't use red paint, I use the law. She closed the binder, hard like a gavel falling. And with that, Evelyn Whitfield stepped down from the podium, walking not like a politician, but like a mother who'd just made damn sure the world would never forget her daughter's name, or her husband's. Behind her, the headlines were already being written in real time. DOJ drops bombshell on Georgia judiciary. The fall of Judge Greaves begins. Justice unsealed. Georgia woke up the next morning to headlines that read like aftershocks. DOJ files explode judicial scandal. Greaves fallout begins. Courts in crisis. Who's next? Because when the Attorney General goes nuclear on a sitting judge and backs it up with receipts, there's no such thing as an isolated blast. The cracks don't stop at one bench. They run under the whole damn building. By 9:17 a.m., the Georgia Judicial Oversight Committee had called its first emergency session in nearly 15 years. Phones lit up like a Christmas tree. Subpoenas were flying out of inboxes. State senators were holding impromptu press briefings, trying to act shocked, like they hadn't shared golf carts with these judges 2 months ago. And deep inside the Capitol, in a closed-door, badge-only chamber, someone finally said what nobody wanted to say out loud. If we protect Greaves, we go down with him. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, something else hit the courthouse steps. A class action lawsuit filed by the Southern Justice Project, backed by the NAACP, ACLU, and 5 of the most savage civil rights lawyers in the Southeast. It named Judge Ronald Greaves as the lead defendant, but it didn't stop there. It named Monroe County. It named the state of Georgia. It named the Judicial Review Board for failing to act. The suit was nearly 300 pages thick, stamped with Whitfield v. Greaves et al., and it came in like a wrecking ball wrapped in legal precedent. Inside, over 120 plaintiffs, former juvenile defendants, mothers of incarcerated teens, fathers who'd watched their sons buried in prison jumpsuits, exonerated citizens who'd lost years of their lives and now wanted them back. "We told them," one plaintiff said at the press conference, tears in his voice but steel in his spine. "We told them. And they looked the other way. Well, now they can look at us in court." By noon, Greaves's name was a trending topic in 12 states, but so were others. Because now people were asking questions. Greaves didn't work in a vacuum. He didn't bury complaints alone. He didn't issue rulings without someone rubber stamping the system around him. And that system, it was sweating. Judges who once looked untouchable were lawyering up. Court officers were calling out sick. Prosecutors were shredding old emails, and Judicial assistants were suddenly finding opportunities in the private sector. In Glynn County, Judge Marlene Dietz postponed all hearings indefinitely. In Fulton, Judge Isaac Frazier went silent, his clerk not so subtly wiping his public calendar. And in Savannah, a longtime magistrate was seen being escorted out of chambers. No one would say why. The Georgia Supreme Court released a rare midday statement. "We are committed to transparency, accountability, and the highest ethical standards in all branches of the judiciary. All allegations are being taken seriously." Translation: "We're terrified. Please don't lump us in." And in the middle of it all, outside Monroe County's courthouse, Zara Whitfield stood quietly with a group of students, protest signs in hand. Someone asked her, "Did you think it would go this far?" She smiled, not smug, just sure. "This isn't far," she said. "This is just the first crack in the wall." And Georgia, it had only just begun to shake. It didn't happen with handcuffs. There was no dramatic perp walk. No headline-grabbing takedown in the middle of open court. No cameras caught the exact moment when Judge Ronald Greaves's career collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. But when it fell hard. At 7:42 a.m., a courier hand-delivered the suspension order. Effective immediately, Judge Ronald E. Greaves is placed on administrative leave pending full federal and state investigation into judicial misconduct, civil rights violations, and ethics breaches under Georgia Code, SAR 110. By 8 a.m., the plaque on his courtroom door was gone. By 8:15, so were his allies. The same people who once kissed his ring, DAs, clerks, committee chairs, local reps, who sat front row at his fundraiser dinners, suddenly couldn't remember the man. Couldn't recall that round of golf, that closed-door meeting, that one wink and nod plea deal from '09. They scattered like rats on a burning ship. Greaves tried to spin it, of course. Released a statement about the politicization of the judiciary. Called it a witch hunt. Framed himself as the last noble defender of real law and order in a world gone woke. But the public didn't buy it. Hell, even Fox didn't bite this time. Because by now, a Greaves had become a term. Shorthand for a corrupt judge. A walking relic of systemic racism. A man who handed out maximum sentences like candy and thought due process meant making black kids prove they were human. The memes were ruthless, the merch brutal. One t-shirt read, "Don't be a Greaves." And then came the moment. His final walk. No bench, no robe, just a sad little gray suit, a deflated briefcase, and the slow, lonely shuffle of a man realizing the world had moved on without him. He was leaving the courthouse, his courthouse, for the last time when he saw her. Zara, 17, calm, standing near the front steps in a loose white tee and jeans, hair in a bun, holding a spiral notebook in one hand and a water bottle in the other. No cameras, no press, just her. And Greaves, he stopped. He looked at her. Really looked this time, not through a lens of bias or power. Just a man, hollowed out, staring at the girl whose name would echo longer than his ever did. He tried to harden his face, tried to summon that sneer, the one that used to silence courtrooms and crush futures. But it wouldn't come. There was nothing left to hide behind. Zara didn't flinch. She didn't say a word. Just tilted her head slightly, like she was studying a painting she used to hate. And Greaves? He looked away first. Because shame, once it finds you, doesn't scream. It settles in. He walked past her with no words, no dignity, and no audience. Just the quiet realization that the girl he once called ungrateful had outlasted him. By the time he reached the sidewalk, someone had already scrawled across the courthouse steps in bold red chalk. Sergeant Malik Whitfield, 1979-2019, we remember. And above it, in smaller letters, judges fall, names don't. It had been 1 year. 1 year since that courtroom. 1 year since her name shattered headlines, sparked protests, and took down a judge. 1 year since a 17-year-old girl walked into a legal system built to erase her and rewrote the ending. And now, Zara Whitfield stood on a stage that stretched wide and historic. Harvard University, class of 2026 commencement speaker. She wore crimson robes, her father's dog tags tucked under the collar. The wind played at the hem of her stole, stitched with her mother's initials and a stitched quote from her first protest sign. Truth doesn't beg permission. The crowd stretched as far as she could see. Alums, professors, families, cameras everywhere. The air buzzed. Not just with pride, but with expectation. And Zara? She didn't walk up to the mic nervous. She walked like someone who'd been here before. "Good morning," she began, voice strong and clear. "My name is Zara Whitfield, and I'm honored to stand before you as part of a class that has weathered chaos, history, and change." Polite applause. "Some of you know me because of what happened in a courtroom in Georgia. Some of you may know me from a video that went viral, or a headline, or a protest, or a mural. But before all that, I was just a kid, a daughter, a student, someone who once thought justice was a quiet room where the truth was always heard." She paused, let the stillness settle. "I know better now." The lawn was silent. Everyone leaned in. Justice is not guaranteed by titles. It's not defined by robes or ruled by gavels. Justice lives in the space between voices, and it dies when silence wins. 1 year ago, I was called a thug by a judge who didn't know me. He didn't know my grades, my dreams, my father's name. He didn't care to, but I spoke anyway. And when I did, it wasn't just for me. It was for every student who's been labeled before they were listened to. Every name lost in sealed files. Every voice told to wait their turn while the powerful rewrote the truth. Murmurs of agreement, one loud yes from the back. "Power is a funny thing," she continued. "People think it comes from speaking loudly, yelling, shouting. But real power, it comes from refusing to stay quiet when silence is what they expect." They expected me to back down, to apologize, to shrink, but I didn't, and neither should you. She took a breath, let it rise in her chest. "If you remember anything from this speech, let it be this. Justice doesn't start with institutions. It starts with you, with what you notice, what you speak up about, and most importantly, what you refuse to ignore." She looked across the crowd, her voice softening but never losing weight. "My father taught me that silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of choice. You don't have to raise your voice to raise the truth." A hush fell. Then her final words. "So as we leave this place, this incredible, complicated, powerful place, never forget, even in silence, we still speak." The mic echoed with her final breath. Then came the applause. Not polite, not routine. It started with a standing ovation from the front row and spread like wildfire. Cheers, tears, chants of her name. One professor turned to another and said, "That wasn't a speech. That was a moment." And Zara? She stepped back from the podium, eyes gleaming. Not from pride, but from purpose. Because she hadn't just echoed through that ceremony. She'd echoed into history.